Recovery and sobriety can be a long process. Like getting a master's degree, it takes time to truly learn how to be sober and then get good at it. When people go to college, most fail a few times, miss some classes, and get some C's and D's on their way to a degree. It takes 3 to 4 years for a dedicated student to earn a master's degree. So let's keep it in perspective. Earning a degree in sobriety is just as tumultuous, and classes missed, along with C's and D's and F's, are going to happen. Learning to manage a disorder that is not only debilitating, but even deadly, could not be rushed. No one expects you to become an expert at anything else in life in 30 to 90 days, but when it comes to sobriety, expectations can be unrealistic. To use another analogy, people train for months before attempting to climb Mount Everest. Even before training, only experienced climbers would dare make the ascent on Everest. Even highly trained, experienced climbers use a Sherpa, a local guide, to assist them in climbing. Some make it, some don't. Some go back the way they came, disgraced in failure. Some die. Sound familiar? Counselors who are addicts are familiar with the territory, the climate, the trails, the weather, the circumstances. They know the ins and outs. They have instincts and insights no one else has because, like the Sherpa, they lived it. Been there and done that. Outpatient is appropriate treatment for almost all degrees of addiction, unless the addict is using so severely and frequently that permanent damage is imminent. When using becomes so reckless and dangerous that it is a life-threatening situation, residential becomes a must. Now I know what you're thinking. Anyone using drugs is in a potentially life-threatening situation. While that is technically true, the level of risk to a user who is smoking heroin or drinking heavily, doing meth, etc., is not typically life-threatening in the immediate. Meth can't kill you. It can make you want to kill yourself, sure, but meth in and of itself is not deadly. Smoking heroin is dangerous, but it's extremely rare, I've never even heard of it ever, that someone will OD smoking smack, but it is possible. Drinking excessively is dangerous, can definitely be life-threatening, especially considering what type of behaviors the drinker has while drunk. Driving, fighting, but we can't be neurotic about it. We need to evaluate the risk and the actual life-threatening level of someone's using, because pulling the trigger too fast on residential is a costly mistake, both financially as well as to the long-term recovery. So yes, everyone using is at risk, but that's like saying everyone who drives on the freeway is at risk, so don't drive, ever. In the dangerous game of recovery, we are forced to take calculated and controlled risks to reach the ultimate goal. Rushing to the finish line can make things worse. Don't use residential treatment to export your problem. It will only find its way back to your doorstep. I'm going to give you the inside track on my success as a counselor, and this is risky since I made my living at it and I'm giving away my trade secrets, so I hope you paid full price for this. If every outpatient counselor follows my formula, they can expect the same 80% success rate I enjoy as a counselor. However, it's fair to point out that the 80% successful clients I have seen are all on different timetables. With some it was a year, with some 3 years, with some 6 months. But 80% of them do recover and make long-term, some even permanent absence and sobriety. I would say being 10 years clean is a success. I would say 10 years with 2 relapses is a success. My goal as a counselor is prioritized thusly. 1, no one dies. 2, getting the client to realize they need to work at recovery and someday stop using. 3, client does not move on to harder drugs than what I found them on. 4, if when client ceases counseling, their commitment to sobriety does not wane, it increases. And 5, client used less than when I met them. 6, client stops using hard drugs. 7, client stops abusing all drugs. 8, client finds purpose in their life and commits to living free. I am ultimately working towards all of these, but I am willing to settle for 1 through 6 and call it a success. It depends on the client. Philip is 19 when his parents come to see me. Their son is out of control, using everything imaginable. Pills, heroin, meth, anything he can get his hands on. He sells drugs, steals for drugs, and proclaims emphatically that he has no intention of stopping. He hates recovery, 12 steps, counselors, his parents, and family members. He trusts no one, is super smart, and thinks counselors are douchebag liars and hypocrites who are too dumb to teach anything useful. I tell them I need 5 minutes with him. Give me 5 minutes with him and I will convince him to continue to see me and slowly get him to change his mind. I understand why he thinks those things and I don't blame him. I need 5 minutes to show him I'm different. He won't come, they both said. He hates counseling and he hates us too. How can we get you 5 minutes with him? So I said, option 1, a surprise confrontational visit at his father's apartment where Philip is staying. Not a good option. Philip could get mad and run away. Option 2, a surprise phone call from me. Might work, but he might hang up and not give me a chance. We don't even know each other yet. Option 3, physically drag him to my office. No good. He's a legal adult and the parents had no leverage. He could not be persuaded with any ultimatums and he was physically strong. Me, bribe him. What? Bribe him. Tell him you will literally pay him to come here for one appointment. He's a fool not to take it. He doesn't even have to talk to me. He just has to agree and then show up to get his bribe money, which he probably needs to buy some more dope. How much? Whatever it takes. Start low and work your way up until he either says yes or you say no. How much is up to you. Philip agreed to a $200 bribe. He arrived at my office the very next day. As he entered, looking grungy and disheveled, I said to him, "You're welcome. You're actually making more than I am for this session, so you should be happy about that. You should probably cut me in for some of that cash." He laughed and seemed happy about the arrangement. "See, I've already improved your life and only just met you." Philip was pretty cool. Good sense of humor. Me too. Turns out he's quite philosophical. Me too. Philip has genius IQ and is way too smart for his own good. A nihilist who thinks that life has no real purpose, so why not do whatever you want before you become worm food? In the next 20 minutes, I challenged his nihilism and explained to him scientific and spiritual perspectives, how and why life does indeed have meaning. Don't let anyone ever tell you you can't know something. You can know anything. He wept, cried openly and sobbed about how all he ever wanted was to know the meaning of life. He vowed to commit to sobriety and learn more from me. He found a tiny bit of meaning to his existence and it was cathartic for him. For me too. Philip struggled for months to stay clean, using less than before but still copious amounts of drugs. His appetite for drugs was huge. All day, every day, people called and asked him to wheel and deal, middleman, which put drugs into his possession. Pretty hard to quit when that's happening. Still, he never swore off his commitment to get sober and keep trying. I taught him not only about addiction, but about life and about God. In order to get the next lesson in philosophy or religion, he had to use less and try to be clean for at least a day or two at a time and arrive at our meetings clear-headed. After some time, Philip's parents pulled the plug, refusing to pay my fee unless he was 100% clean. It was unrealistic, and so I was forced to see him for free. Philip struggled to keep his appointments with me, showing up late and missing some. I was forced to drop him from my schedule, but we stayed in touch by phone. He was always welcome to visit if I had time to see him when he called. Philip finally OD'd and almost died. Since then, he got clean. As far as I know, he stayed clean. Even if he hasn't, I know when I met him, he was determined to die from drugs, and he was determined to live and get clean when he left me. That's a success. Outpatient counseling has distinct advantages over facility corporate type treatment. Outpatient counseling can be customized to the individual. Outpatients provide while living in the real world. You don't have to leave town, your job, your family, or your life to get it. It's considerably less expensive or intrusive to daily living. Treatment is customized to the individual. I get to know my clients the old-fashioned way. I actually talk to them. Sure, there's intake forms, but I almost never even look at them. My forms are 1 page of name and address info, 1 page of fee disclosure and agreement, and 1 page lawyer form that basically says you've got to pay even if I fail and make you worse. Standard intake. If I want to know how long they've been doing drugs, I don't ask them to check a box. I ask them to their face. If I want to know their kids' names and ages, I ask them. While having these conversations about the circumstances and events of their lives, an interesting thing happens. I get to know them by the way they speak, words they use, body language, attitudes, demeanor, humor, etc. And they get to know me as a real person. During an initial 90-minute session, I can get their history, educate them on addiction like never before, and make a lot of it seem like casual conversation instead of therapy. I let the session take a life of its own. If they don't want to talk much about drugs, that's fine. Want to talk about how crappy your parents are? I can do that. Want to talk about the boyfriend who's making you crazy or the friends who are backstabbers? I can do that. We got time because I'll make the time. Close the door. Sit down. When it comes to giving advice, it has to be tailor-made to the individual. What are they capable of? Are they ready to run a marathon, or do they need to start with slow walks? Do they believe in God? What kind of life do they want for themselves? Are they deep thinkers, my favorites, or superficial types? It's not my job to make them like me. It's my job to help them realize their own potential. My job is not to define happiness for them. It's to help them define it in their own terms, to their own personality, and then to help them attain it. Treatment is provided while living in the real world. Residential treatment is insular. Outpatient allows you to learn as you go. When you tell someone in rehab, just say no, they have no practical application of that technique. When you tell them to avoid their old friends or they will probably relapse, they have no real application for that knowledge. It's abstract or conceptual. They agree with you, but remember who we're dealing with. People who administer dangerous drugs into their bodies and lives are definitely the find out for myself types who need to experience something to verify if it's true or not. Instead of instructing, just say no and avoid your friends, I work an imaginative process which makes the concept more actual. We cannot rely on our superficial understanding of a concept. If we're able to emotionally connect, it becomes something personal and therefore real. Me, what will you do if your friends call and want to hang out? Client, just say no? Ugh. By using what-if scenarios, we set up an examination of what could go wrong, how it could go wrong, and how to write the script. Sure, just say no, but what about the fact that you've been lonely and sitting around and ruminating on drugs and you're super duper bored, and then they call and tell you, don't worry, no drugs, just hang out. What then? The client says, then it's probably okay. Can you really rely on them not to party when you're around? Probably not. If you're hanging your sobriety on someone else's commitment, it's probably going to fail. Obvious reminders, just say no are not enough to anticipate the variety of possibilities. We cannot simply be remotely instructed what to say or do in a situation. By working through what-if scenarios, we become trained to create scripts for even unpredictable scenarios. If family and work stress you out, being told to simply not let it get to you isn't enough, even though it's correct. By using many what-if script scenarios, a philosophy is learned, and the details can be mixed and matched to specific scenarios. If a drug temptation is not presented the exact way rehearsed, and it never is, they begin to learn how to apply similar scripts to a variety of scenarios. This method is termed motivational interviewing, a method that uses back and forth dialogue, interviewing, to influence the client to draw a rational, sensible conclusion on their own, which motivates them to apply it as it is perceived as their very own idea. I was intuitively doing motivational interviewing as a private counselor for years before I even learned it was an actual therapeutic modality. The style is powerful. A personal counselor can help you deal with probable scenarios by advising you in real time. You can work together on specific stressors before, during, and after they occur. Pressure with school has not only been anticipated, but are given workable strategies and solutions that are custom fit to the situation, not just in theory. Not just how to deal with a class or a girlfriend, but your class and your girlfriend. Learning as you go is riskier, but these challenges are the challenges all addicts must face someday to live in the world, stay clean, and be adaptable. Outpatient doesn't enjoy the immediate absence that residential does, but in the long run, where it really counts, outpatient enjoys the long-term sobriety that residential does not. You don't have to leave town, your job, your family, your life to get it. Many people cannot commit to a residential program because the thought of leaving everything they know is far too intimidating for them, even when everything they know is toxic and irritating. If you have kids or school or friends, a job, a boyfriend, a spouse, or any other thing you believe is important, you are not likely willing to leave it behind, even though they're all encouraging you to do it. The subconscious will rationalize sticking nearby simply to avoid the unknown and to protect what is familiar. Some falsely convince themselves that they can do it on their own if they just try real hard. Outpatient allows people to commit at the level they're ready for. It's my job as a counselor to bring them to a deeper commitment. If I work at their pace but always push for more, they will learn rather than reject. If I force them to deal with too much or too little, they will lose interest and/or confidence. Most addicts I meet are in dire straits. They're broke and need to work. They're in danger of losing their job or spouse. Leaving can make things worse in some ways, and they need a program they can do while earning a living, going to school, keeping up their house or family. Moving into an inpatient facility is simply not a reality for many recoverers. It's considerably less expensive and intrusive. If someone sees an outpatient counselor 4 times a month, once per week, the cost is $500, $800 with drug screens. 12 months is $7,000 to $10,000, and that's maximum. Most clients see me every week for the first 3 months, every other week for the following 3, and then 1 to 3 times per month thereafter. They can always have more time if they need it, or less if they don't. Not only is it less expensive than residential, but the amount is not due up front or in huge installments. Pay as you go, fire me if you want. Come more often if you need and can afford it, or less if you can't. It's up to you and your family to decide what's best and affordable. I'm only there to evaluate what you need and make a recommendation. I can't force anything. Outpatient is less intrusive as you come once per week and more only if your own schedule and budget permits it. As a private counselor, I work evenings and weekends to accommodate my clients. It's not always easy, but somehow everyone gets in when they need it. Typically, outpatient is the best method, but where to find one, a good one, is challenging. At this time, unfortunately, very few counselors are capable of making a private practice and are swallowed up by the residential places who underpay them and insist they conform to generic programs. The poor compensation counselors receive in this industry is a problem. Smart and resourceful recovered addicts do not find counseling a lucrative option, so they don't turn to it. This creates a majority of counselors who are intellectually and emotionally underqualified and inexperienced in life and as people. It's a shame. In behavioral treatment, psychiatrists earn the most and often do the least. They hardly speak to anyone anymore and instead write prescriptions for most of what they treat. Their waiting rooms are full and their schedules are often backed up for weeks, while insurance companies force you to see them and only them under your plan, if you have a plan, while they often do the most generic work. Time after time, I see people who've not had their psych med reevaluated in 5 to 10 years. There isn't one thing in the world that works the same on you today as it did 5 years ago. Yet psychiatrists can be so lazy, they don't even address anything unless you complain about it. Psychologists are often overeducated. They've been to college, but have they been to the school of hard knocks like most of their patients? It takes more than a PhD to know about life. Drug and alcohol counselors are not legally allowed to practice psychology or therapy as it's outside their scope and training. Yet by law, a non-addict PhD is allowed to treat an addict simply because drug dependency was covered for a brief time during a part of a semester in college. The average drug and alcohol counselor is paid less than $20 per hour, but the psychiatrist or psychologist earns triple digits per session. Many, if not most, psychiatrist appointments are $200 and last less than 20 minutes. Addiction counseling is one of the most sensitive and delicate treatment processes there are. To treat addiction, you need to know about life, other disorders, all types of drugs, pharmacology, marriage, children, teens, family, career, stress, sleep problems, eating problems, emotional problems, medical problems. When an addict client turns to you for help in an hour of need, you can't simply make a referral. You will have to help them right there on the spot. If you don't, they could relapse or worse. Every part of life comes under the umbrella of addiction recovery, just as I'm sure every part of life needs to be addressed when being treated by a psychologist for a specific disorder. Addiction counselors have huge responsibilities and their pay should be proportionate. If more counselors worked independently instead of settling for working in a facility, the cream would rise to the top. The only way I've survived and even thrived as a private counselor is because I get results. If you don't get results, your practice will fail, and that will weed out the ones who suck at it. Not so true with the PhDs. If the public hears this cry and insists on more private outpatient counseling, eventually more counselors will go into private practice, making the demand higher for them and forcing facilities to pay better, attracting a more elite group of addicts to administer treatment. Counselors, start your own outpatient business if you think you can hack it. Public, seek out experienced, well-established private counselors first and stick with them if you're seeing improvement. Stay away from the residential until a last or later resort. An addiction counselor should specialize in addiction. The best combination would be a recovering addict with over 5 years of sobriety and highly trained, legally certified with a minimum of 2 years field experience. If the helping professional is a non-addict, then the professional should have addiction counseling certification combined with a behavioral health degree such as a master's or PhD. It is difficult for most addicts to have confidence in a professional that is a non-addict. They can feel even more confident in a counselor who is equal or more of an addict than they are. If you smoke heroin, then he or she better have shot it up. The local counselor alternative in my town is a degreed professional, an MFT, who did some coke in high school for a couple years. Our community has a heroin epidemic, and most of the addicts felt it was impossible for him to relate to them. On one occasion, he compared pot to heroin, saying pot was just as bad or severe. No, it's not. Sorry, a non-addict treating addiction should regularly consult with a certified, trained addict counselor. It seems unusual that MDs and PhDs, having barely brushed the subject in college, are permitted by law to treat addiction, yet a licensed addiction counselor is only allowed to treat addiction. I like that addiction counselors' scopes are limited. That's smart. But to allow someone with a PhD to treat a disorder as sensitive and elusive as addiction without at least being a specialist in it or not having been through it himself or herself is not effective. Many of the doctors who are permitted to dominate the bookshelves on this subject are simply not qualified. So please, doctors, regularly consult with a qualified, smart, insightful, and well-trained addict to help guide your programs. Your chosen counselor should be able to use several case examples when discussing treatment methods with you. His or her explanations should be cogent, coherent, and accessible to you. If the counselor can't explain things in terms you can understand, then how is she or he ever going to be able to help you? If your counselor is a genius but only speaks Latin and you don't, what's the point? The counselor should fulfill the same criteria laid out in the sponsor requirements section at least: mature, organized, established in life, and responsible. A good counselor needs to communicate to clients on the level of the client, not their own. A counselor should be versatile in communication, not just smart. He or she should have time for you. If an addiction counselor doesn't call you back within 4 or 5 hours, especially if you state that it's somewhat urgent, don't go to him. I work about 50 hours per week in session, another 10 or so, no charge by phone with my clients. I also have a family and a very full life filled with responsibilities and obligations. In spite of that, I return all my calls myself, even if it's just to say I got your message and need to set up a time to discuss everything later. I always return the call within a few hours. If a counselor candidate can't call you back as a potential client, he or she won't be there when you need him or her as an existing, more veteran client. I make a commitment to my clients to try to be there for them after hours and on weekends if they need me. It's impossibly stressful, but it's part of the job. If your counselor can't be at least somewhat accessible to you after hours, she's not invested. Everyone has to start somewhere. So where do new counselors get experience if they are trying to make it on their own? Time should definitely be spent working in a facility as an intern or counseling assistant. I myself interned at a local county-run facility. Prior to that, I had already spent 2 years as a hypnotherapist and a life coach. A life coach may not seem like much, but my caseload and issues were pretty intense and in all areas. Between the varied cases, my age, and my life circumstances, I felt I was ready to try to make it on my own in addiction counseling, and I did. Life experience is sometimes far more important than practical academic training and knowledge. When you consult with a counselor, you should feel confident about him. Does he seem to have practical knowledge as well as expertise? Can she answer the tough questions? Listen well and follow along? Come up with something fresh and different and unique for you? If so, he or she might be the real deal. Selecting a counselor is an important choice. Don't settle on one because your insurance covers it, because your insurance isn't going to come to your aid when you relapse or your kid ODs. Select a counselor that can make a difference in your life. Stick with your counselor and make him or her work for their money. Don't be lazy in your recovery, and don't let your counselor be lazy either. I encourage every caller to vet me out. Ask me the tough questions, and if you're not absolutely sure, get someone you can be sure of. It's too delicate and important to settle. I tell my clients there are only 2 questions they ever have to ask themselves about me. 1, do I trust him? In other words, do you trust me to have your best interest at heart? Do you trust that I am not here to mess up your life and play games with you for my own entertainment or profit? And 2, do I have confidence in his ability? In other words, Do you have confidence in my intellect, my reasonability, my expertise, my knowledge and experience? If the answer is yes to both of those questions, then do what I tell you. If the answer is no or you're not sure, fire me and move on. You need to give me 100% of control of your sobriety. Not 100% of control of your life, but of your sobriety. Whatever percentage of control of your sobriety you give to me, that's exactly how much sobriety you'll have. If you give me 90% control, then you'll have 90% sobriety, which is equal to 0. It's like being pregnant. You're never sort of pregnant. You either are or you're not. Same with being sober. You're either sober or you're not. If you trust me, I will take you to the mountaintop. A better life that has an addicted person on drugs you cannot imagine or visualize. When you trust me, it makes me want to serve you even better and be more careful and cautious. If you have confidence in me, I will take you there quickly, taking risks and pushing you as hard as you can be pushed. Because when you have confidence in me, I have more confidence in you, and we can progress together. My confidence in you allows me to take risks with your recovery that will ultimately teach you what you need to learn, even if it's painful. It's most effective when a counselor meets with a client every week in the beginning and includes sessions with family members too. If time and budget allow, we begin like this. First session, one-on-one with individual client, IC. Same week, session with parents or family members without IC. Second week, one-on-one with IC. Third week, one-on-one with IC and second group session with family and IC. Fourth weekend on, one-on-one regularly and family members every 3 to 4 weeks regularly. More if crisis is occurring or there are errors by either family members or the IC. While it is tempting to schedule multiple sessions each week, this is often counterproductive. The counselor-client relationship needs dynamism, and oversaturation can lead to stagnation. Stagnation leads to unresponsiveness. Time between sessions also allows the client to experiment with what was learned so the strategies can be refined and customized upon review. Daily or multi-weekly sessions are only needed when there's a crisis. As a private counselor, I've listed my own red flags about those I treat. Just as you should vet out any helping professional being trusted to work with you and your family, I form opinions about things too. When family members make a big effort to initiate counseling and to see me at the beginning, but don't keep in touch regularly on their own initiative, I see a red flag. I suspect they're not reliable and their support is weak. If they're not wanting to be involved, I know my client is not getting the support that could benefit him or her, and possibly those family members are making it even harder. These are the types that simply want to stick their heads in the sand and wish the problem would go away. This client will have a hard time getting the supportive help he or she needs, as one attempt after another will be met with skepticism instead of support, accountability, and responsibility. When people email to ask me about my methods and prices, I know they're almost never serious. If you're in real trouble and you really want help, you aren't satisfied with emailing someone who will likely need to play a major role in one of the most significant episodes of your life. Asking me to email you information about my methods is like asking an artist to jot down how they paint a portrait. It's complicated, and a counselor's methods and processes are quite personal. Methods and fees is vital information, but if you're seriously considering me, pick up the phone and make contact. Let's talk. Would you email the fire department if your house was on fire? This is a valid question, and I must admit that it's better to hear this up front so I know how much time and effort to give the call. If that is the decisive criteria, I prefer to know it up front so I'm not wasting too much time. If cost is the deciding criteria, say so up front. But you may want to attend 12-step meetings for free and save up for professional help. I believe in quality over quantity, and value here is about results, not cost. Cost is an important issue, but I have also learned that 75% of those who ask that as their first question do not commit, regardless of cost or resources they have. They've yet to come to the conclusion of how sobriety in their life can be valued. Personally, I'm a soft touch. Someone who discloses money issues up front but says they are really in need of help usually hears me reply, "My fee is $170 a session, but work hard and make progress and you can pay whatever you can afford." Their honesty combined with a sincere need for help combined with my moral need to serve others and my stable success makes it nearly impossible to resist. Hi, can you tell me about your detox program? People looking for a quick way through withdrawal ask about detox instead of asking about long-term help. I try to advise them to think in the long term and remind them that detox without help is bound to repeat itself. But I won't spend a lot of time on the phone with those calls either. They're not ready yet for what I'm offering. I'll help anybody, but the red flag here is that 99% of those who tell me they're forced to fulfill a court obligation are not serious. I direct them to the local whoever, whatever program that takes money and gives you a certificate of completion to satisfy a judge, which any counselor, including me, can do. I have been proven wrong on occasion on all of these accounts. Some emailers have been committed. Some asked about cost, truly wanted help. Some asked about detox, simply didn't know what else to ask. And some fulfilling court orders wanted more than just stay out of jail. Therefore, I try to give time to all who call because you never know, and I'm in the business of not judging. That can be hard sometimes, but it's never impossible. I hope someday the recovery industry will evolve and more talented, qualified counselors will start private practice help. It's a needed shift.